Recording is on.
All right, so today's April 11th, 2021, and we'll continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. Where do you want to start today?
We were going full gusto last time.
Yeah.
Want to try to pick it up from there, or does somebody else have some other questions? Or
I mean, I don't mind continuing the topic of transgenderism. I mean,
Well, we were talking also about about gender fluidity. We were talking about differences between. I'm the only two women in this meeting, and a lot of the talks are by men, about men, and sometimes I find I told you last week where I left it. I said, "This is very alien. What do I have to say?" Today I'm too tired to talk. I didn't sleep well, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to think about this. Sometimes the aliens have landed.
well, so Gary didn't turn up, did he? We were going through his list. I think we got about two questions from his list.
No, Gary. I was talking to Gary by messaging, and he said he couldn't turn up today. It was enough with everything on Reddit, so he was going to wait.
He's already overloaded.
I can understand because it takes a long time to recover from all the things that you read. It takes a long time.
Oh,
it takes. I'm serious. It's not. It does take a lot. It depends on how you react. But my type of person, everything takes a long time to process, then to understand, then to emotionally everything, and then it makes you very tired, and then you get very distressed, and then you have to put it back into other. It's a whole thing. It's not just okay. I'm going to read a post on Reddit. It's really it's great, and we're going to laugh. No. It goes much deeper for me than So I can understand Gary too.
Did you see the post that I did on the Ising spin model and those kind of?
Which one, Hugh?
The Ising spin model. There was
I'm probably behind some of the ones I wanted to watch. Is that recent?
A few days ago, I saw it.
No, I haven't read that one yet.
I didn't get to it, but I know it's a good one.
Yeah.
It's one of
There's a lot to.
There's really a lot in that kind of thing. There was somebody there that responded on that one and said that they were doing I don't know, a paper on it or something like that, or something in college, and so I thought, I'd really like to talk to them about it because that's the whole subject is kind of crucial for activism and a movement, and just in general. And that spin model, it answers so much about basic questions that people struggle with, like why is there polarization in the States? Why is there a two-party system? Why are there Republicans and Democrats? Why is there left and right? And the most important thing with that is symmetry breaking, because what it is that we need to, if we have any chance as a species, we need to break symmetry. So everything is homeostatic. It tends towards conservatism, and I believe it goes so deep that I think we've got two brain hemispheres because of that. It's to stop us going off on wild goose chases. So Ian McGilchrist has a different view. He thinks we have two brain hemispheres because one is detailed oriented and one is wide lens. It's more macro oriented. But I think that is true. But I think the macro lens that he sees is because that's the four older brain layers that I would say, and the tight focus left hemisphere is really because it's dominated by the alien cortex and it's looking in frames. So he sees that there's, you know, this Procrustean perceptual frame, and then he's saying, well, that's a narrow focus. And then, you know, the wide focus and generalized perception and stuff is, you know, your other 4 layers. But I think it's more than that. I see it in terms of the 5 brain layers, and then in the split. The split is very interesting because mammals up to about dogs and things like that, they don't have a split brain. It starts to split with primates, and then it's very, very pronounced with us. And no one has a good theory for why it is split. The corpus callosum is the bit that connects the 2 hemispheres, and that's where most of the brain traffic is going through those 2 hemispheres. So there's this kind of mystery for neurologists is, why do we have 2 brain hemispheres and then masses of traffic going along this connection? And I think the reason is explained in the Ising spin model. So if any of this is interesting to people, then I'll go in deeper. But it's crucial from the point of view of where we're headed in terms of collapse, because the whole thing, like XR's trouble now, any movement is struggling to get beyond this kind of deadlock where both sides are in deadlock with each other. And, you know, we're kind of in this deadly embrace that's, unless we break it, we won't be able to make a turn sharp enough to avoid extinction, I don't think. But, you know, the mystery of how to break deadlock is really in that Ising spin model. So you could go through hours and hours of that. But, yeah, I don't know of a good way to just compress it and explain to people without them going to sleep. But the key to what Roger Hallam is trying to do, what all these organizations are trying to do, is I don't think they really even know it. They think if you just pull harder, you can get everybody together, but that's not possible. And if you play with that Ising spin model, you'll see why. Just in a nutshell, what it is every action you do has an equal and opposite reaction. It's kind of like Newton's third law, and that's first law. And that
third law.
Third law, is it? Third law. Okay. So Newton's third law is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so, you know, that kind of deadlock that things get into, or, you know, this kind of reactionary thing where people, you know, push and then they get a reactionary response and then it goes nowhere, is, I think, it was an evolutionary strategy that kept us, you know, conservative. It pays for primates and a species to be creative, not get into a kind of neurosis, just a kind of closed loop. But it also means that we don't go off on a tangent. We don't go off on a wild goose chase. And you can see all of this, how it works out in, say, the decision-making process of, say, bees and things like that, Hymenoptera. When bees go to find a new hive, they send out scouts in all directions, 360 degrees. And the scouts all come back and they all say, you know, with a waggle dance, you know, how good their new home was, whatever they discovered. They get excited and try and communicate that. But you can see if one of them got overly excited about a shitty discovery, the whole hive would, you know, it basically, you're dominated by the long tail. See that? Does that make any sense? Is when imagine they all radiate out, find a bunch of different potential new hives. When they all come back, if you looked at it, just graphed out the preference of each one of those new places to go to, you would find it as a bell curve. You know, the majority would be okay. There'd be some good ones, you know, on the long tails, and there'd be some shit ones on the long tails. So what the hive does is they try to avoid the long tails and get the the mean of the best. And the way that's done is sort of like an Ising spin model. Is they will have the bees compete. The waggle dance is kind of a competition that results in a kind of conservatism. So the beehive is best, not going for the optimum hive, but going for the safest. And I think that primates are doing the same thing. So nobody goes off and says, I think we should, do a lemming thing and go off and crazy ass shit. Immediately, someone else, not only do we have that, in one brain hemisphere will come up with a crazy ass plan, but we will second guess ourselves with the other brain hemisphere, even within our own heads. But in terms of a collective, we'll also do that. And you can see it if you go and make any kind of proposition. If you come with a thesis, somebody automatically will come with an antithesis. And then, this is, Hegel said this is the Hegelian dialectic, and then from the thesis antithesis emerges the synthesis, and then the synthesis is kind of a merger of the two, or the kind of the logical conclusion from those two. And then, from the synthesis then becomes a thesis for another antithesis, and that's how it's supposed to go. And then Ken Wilber says, and it all goes round spiral, keeps on repeating itself, but keeps on moving forward slightly. So he came out and said, it's not a circular, it's spiral, it does move forward, although it keeps on going. And that's where he gets his spiral dynamics from. But in terms of where we at as a species, is we have to get over that. If say Extinction Rebellion puts forward a thesis like we all screwed, they will naturally get an antithesis, which is climate change is spunk, and the guys will deny and stuff. And by the time we're in an unusual situation that we're not evolved to handle, and that's that by the time we reach a consensus, or people react, they would be reacting to pain. And there isn't enough time. By the time people react in pain to the situation we're heading for, it'll be too late. It's one of the things. It's a strange situation that we never really faced in our history, because we never really came to a thing where you had to predict it far in advance and react when there was just really intellectual evidence, really kind of circumstantial, that's circumstantial evidence is really what we face, and it's with climate change. So people normally react to emotion, and this is one thing where by the time we actually are feeling the emotion, it'll be too late. It probably is too late already, but anyway, we have to carry on as if it isn't. And so these movements come up, and then they think, well, we'll persuade everybody, but what they're doing is what I mentioned before, is if you imagine it like a bus, we're heading towards a cliff. It wouldn't matter if we went right or left, it would be better than where we're going, which is straight ahead. And so these organizations like Extinction Rebellion say, we have to pull the wheel left. And there are just as many people on the right that say, we have to pull it right. And then basically they stay there until there's a symmetry breaking moment. And so the only way to actually accomplish anything is by doing a symmetry breaking movement, and that's what an ARG is designed to do. So if you imagine like things like LARPing and stuff, and role playing, is you pretend to be left, so you pull on the left hand side, and then basically you'll get an equal number of people on the opposite side, but you really are kind of a false flag pulling on the left, and you say like, okay, now we let go. And then you'll get it to go over to the right. Either one, you can break symmetry by pretending. So, but if everybody's kind of blind and at the same level, and they're all pulling their own way, all egotistically, then we will stay going straight ahead, more or less. And so, but the reason for that left-right divide is explained with a spin model, a magnetic spin model. Does anybody understand what that spin model is? Do you want me to go into it?
I'll have to read into it, but I think as an idea, there's a lot of real life examples already, right? Like as you said, ARGs. And then actually this weekend I saw a movie in Netflix that had a similar. I mean, there's like it's called Are you aware of Eric Andre and his
Oh,
type
it
of?
rings a bell. What did he do?
He does talk shows with like kind of
Oh,
B-level celebrities, but his premise is, instead of you know how talk shows are very formalized and they have a script. His aim is to be the worst talk show host. So he does really out there stuff, random things, and I think, yeah, his latest movie has that kind of symmetry breaking aspects of it. So I see that in real life. He goes to like he made a trip from Florida all the way to New York, and he just, it's basically doing pranks, but he meets up with random people. So he doesn't care who he interacts with. So he went to a bar where there's a lot of rednecks, or, you know, conservative types, and he tries to push their buttons. But if there's any time where it gets to like someone's about to beat him up, he always says, "Oh no, I'm just doing a movie," or yeah, don't hurt me. It's just an act. It's just an act. And so, yeah, so that's kind of like when people learn that it's just an act, they lower down their guard and they say, "Oh, okay, yeah, you got me, man. I didn't know that it was just an act." And so he does that with different people, and yeah, I see the power in that. Yeah, yeah.
it's sort of like Sacha Baron Cohen. He also does it.
Yeah, him too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But what it is absurdism. So
Uh-huh.
it's an old art. I mean, it's the art of the fool, right? So is the counterbalance to the king, which is really hyper rational, is the absurd. So that's the role of the fool. It's a kind of sacred role, and it's to protect the sanity of the kingdom. Yeah, I've said before that our problem is we don't have any fools. We don't have enough. So we have all these hyper rational psychopaths, and we don't have enough counterbalances to them. And even the fools, the people that are supposed to play the roles of the fools, like the comedians and stuff, a lot of them are conservative, even though they kind of extreme centrist. So there's nobody that wants to undermine the whole project, the whole civilization project. You don't really see that. I can't think of anybody I mean, except maybe, Robert Anton Wilson and those guys, but those guys are all dead now. I don't know of anybody that's really holding a mirror up to the whole civilization project. The guys that are against it, like, Deep Green Resistance and stuff, they're very, very serious guys.
They are. I wish they had a comedic side too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no mischief in them, and stuff, and so yeah, it's a very dangerous time. I hope that more enlightened people will emerge and that get it, because it is an ancient role. Just I'm not really sure why more people are not stepping up to it. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I wanted to I wanted to just mention that Ising spin model, because if you can understand that spin model and just understand annealing processes, then you can really understand complex social organization. I don't understand how people can be called sociologists and that if they don't understand the physics of things like a spin model, because it is the exact complexity that we're talking about. So yeah, I put a lot of store on it. I'm not sure why more people don't get it. But yeah, and then you see the thing about these really polarized domains that are really in deadlock is they are subject, like swing voters know this, that the real power is in the swing vote, because everybody pushes from one side or left to right. And what it means is the guys in the middle have all the power. And that's traditionally, people have realized that. Everybody from like Napoleon to Hitler, the divide and conquer strategy is as old as the hills. So everybody knows that if you put everybody at loggerheads, then as the decider, you have all the power. But it means that the butterfly effects and stuff that means that you can change the evolution of a complex system. But if there are more than one player in the middle ground that's trying to destabilize the system, then you kind of have to go to battle for who's going to actually tip it and which way. So the guys in the neutral middle ground is where the most intense but subtle battle is going on. The guys on each wing are all kind of gross and hey dude, get in there and put the wheel on.
That's why it's important to get rid of labels, right? That's pretty much neutrality. You're not one way or the other.
Well, you see, one of the advantages of not having an ego or a label is means that you're very fluid. So you can mimic the other side, and that's the key. Is really mimicry. I mean, I think of all these people as insane. And the way to get through to insane people is through mimicry. You have to start, kind of speaking their language and doing that. When they identify with you, then you can shift them. I mentioned in one of the posts this week, it's incredible what people will do for imitation, in terms of imitation. If they identify with you, they will imitate you. And actually, the reason why that came up was actually something that came out of last week about transgender. So Mike posted a thing on anarchism and got banned for it. But it was just a troll post. But what those guys are saying on anarchism is say, well, if you're trans, it's just happens. People are. Loads and loads of people are trans. It's nature. It's not nurture, and so they're claiming all this kind of neutrality and pretending that it's not a cultural fad. So they're saying, well, the reason why there's suddenly an epidemic of trans people now, is not because of culture. It's just because now people are free to actually express that, and it's not. It can't be true. Because you can see the bias, and you can also have a look at some of the statistics. Like if you have a look at some of the papers on things like copycat suicides, there's clear evidence that there's masses of influence. If somebody like a celeb commits suicide, there'll be a spike in suicides of people with the same gender, the same age. Basically, the shorthand is people that identify with that celeb. So the fact that celebs are coming out and changing gender means that it must have an impact. And you can also show that trans people, I think 40% of them attempt suicide. And so there's a correlation between suicide and identification and dysphoria and those kind of psychological things. So I think it's an impossible claim to say that the doctors and the medical profession and the culture is biasing people towards transgender and gender dysphoria, without realizing it. In the name of freedom and the name of understanding and tolerance, they're actually providing a fertile ground for influence. And they won't recognize it, because if they recognize that they're biased, then it implies that they have to move closer towards intolerance. So in the name of tolerance, they've gotten themselves stuck, and the victims are the kids. But so that's kind of shows up in an Ising spin model. Is but the powerful thing though, the whole thing that you can get out of this is really the power of mimicry. And so the reason why movements try to get hold of celebs and try and get them on their side is because people are not really following the celebs, they're mimicking them. And that's the power of a cult, is that you get a close-knit group of people with like-minded ideas. They automatically fence themselves off and put up barriers so that you don't get any outside influences. It means that you're only influenced in that domain, and then they will start copying each other. Then the cult leader can change the culture because it's only got a small group. So, yeah, is any of this interesting? Because I'll go deeper. I'll carry on this line if it is, but otherwise we can change the subject if it's not relevant to anybody.
No, it's okay. It's interesting. Where are you going?
I'm going about how to actually get cultural change. So the whole thing about Roger Halleman, and then the thing that was obsessing Gail Bradbrook. She says, what's the code for cultural change? Well, if you're a CEO or any kind of leader in the military or something, everybody knows that cultural change is one of the hardest things to do, especially for a CEO. CEO comes along, takes over a company or something, and then the company is going in the wrong direction. The old CEO is booted. The new CEO comes along and he has to change the culture. Now, it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. There's so much inertia in culture, and it's deliberate. There again, there's evidence that we've evolved to be conservative and not to do anything too radical. And so people really, really resist. They resist a new CEO coming over. They will pay lip service, but they'll generally just keep their heads below the parapet and just really dig in with quiet obstinance. So I remember that happened to Jimmy Carter. He was a legendary case of that. And what happened to Jimmy Carter is he came in with all this radical change. He was going to, Jimmy Carter was actually a very, very radical president. People don't realize that now because he never accomplished much. But what happened was he took over the administration and they sandbagged him. He didn't understand cultural inertia. So Jimmy Carter is a classic case of not understanding human psychology. And so in the name of I'll give you an example. In the name of democracy and trying to be a nice guy and an everyman, then he did things like, when you walk into the room, when a US president walks into a room, then they play, a hail to the chief. And then immediately hail to the chief strikes up. Everybody knows, they stop talking, and then they turn around and look at the guy coming through the door, and then that establishes that's the lead in to everybody's mimicry in that meeting. They start reflecting that person, all their mirror neurons going. So Jimmy Carter was like a Democrat, and he said, this is all bloody authoritarian. He says, no, you're not going to play hail to the chief when I walk in. So he would walk into a room and no one would notice. And he couldn't get everybody's attention. And he learned the hard way why all these guys learned to do these kind of rituals like hail to the chief. But in all his kind of changes, he did much the same kind of thing. And then what he found in the end was the administration just got obstinate and they just waited for him to leave. So he couldn't get anything done. His own administration just sandbagged him. He couldn't get anything executed. He wasn't the leader anymore. He was kind of like a hostage in his own, in the Oval Office. And so that's where you get to when you don't understand human psychology. But okay, now if Jimmy Carter was a complete psychopath, kind of like the last one, the 45, what the psychopaths do, and they don't learn this in business school or psychology. They find this out for themselves naturally, but they divide a group, and then that division then allows them to be the pivot. So then they can be the decider. And so that's that's how most leaders actually wield power. But okay, so now let me go into in detail why this is. When the Ising spin model in detail. So let me tell you what it is, in case you didn't see it. So in any model, let's say like a political landscape, let's call that a domain, right? Or let's call it a field. So you say like the American electorate. You draw a big fence around it and say what there has n number of people, and you just say you start off where everybody's an independent thinker. Nobody has any ideologies. This is the first time you're going to have an election or anything like that. So the way that's modeled is saying, let's say that everybody's political orientation is like a compass needle, and so say if you right wing, you'd be oriented north, and if you left wing, you'd be oriented south, and then you've got these compass needles, 1,001 for each voter. You would say in a 2D plane, you would model the entire electorate like that. So now what happens, and why do you get from that, which is a complete random, everybody's pointing in random directions, how do you get to that to a two-party system? Well, the way it happens is exactly the way it happens in, say, a metal. To make a metal random, make all the orientations random, is you just heat it up. So if you heat up metal, you get to a point where it passes its Curie point, and there's none of the its electrons actually are in alignment. So each one of the electrons will be in a random direction and moving around. What happens when you bring the temperature of a metal down, which is kind of what happens when you make a country, gradually the emergence of a two-party system is kind of like the population cooling down. It is very closely mimicked to that. So as the cooling effect comes down, then what you find is, imagine these, say, two compass needles. Here's one and here's another. The ones that are closest to each other actually, compromise and then actually form a parallel arrangement. So they actually make a coalition. So if two are closely aligned, they'll compromise and just, you'll wind up in the average of the two. Now, when you've got two like that, that becomes quite a much stronger domain and double the strength that they were before. So then the third and fourth and surrounding needles, then they also will try, they have more probability of orienting in the same direction or an average of the surrounding. Does that make sense? So you have two that, because they lined up, they're stronger. So then the same applies. The next one, the neighboring compass needles, they'll also line up in an average between the two. So basically these will have 2/3 of the force, and this one will have 1/3 of the force, and the average between the 2/3 and 1/3 will, so that they will wind up being oriented, say, in a third direction. Then those three then now become a much more powerful force, and they can capture the next layer. And that's how it goes. So then you say, well, how does this wind up? Well, if you keep on going through the steps, so it's really a kind of Markov chain, I think. But each one of those steps, that's happening all over the place. And the things that are most closely aligned make a coalition. So it's kind of like a voting coalition in an election, a voting bloc or something. You basically people that say, well, we're almost the same politically. We'll just forget our differences and we'll align together. And then that happens in more and more areas until you get, a domain that now you have a big domain with 100 needles all pointing in the same direction. The next domain that is close by, that is almost the same, then they compromise and change, and then that's how it goes. And so you have what's called domains in the metal, and they have domain boundaries of basically the close neighbors that they can't actually bring into alignment with themselves. So those domains get bigger and bigger, and as you go, it takes longer and longer for them to actually form, bigger and bigger pools. So it takes them longer and longer to get coalitions. And finally, the final thing you normally wind up, if you play with those models a while, you'll see that the final thing is you get two domains that are really opposed and they cannot defeat each other. They do eventually defeat each other, or one of them overrides the other one, but it takes an extraordinarily long time, and it might never happen. But it's very common to have one domain, like half of those compass needles, in one orientation and half in the other, and that's semi-stable because they can't actually bring in either one can defeat the other one, and that's kind of like Republican and Democrats. So at some point of cooling, you get this kind of solidification like that. So the only way to change the orientation, well, the fastest way to change it is to heat it all up again and break all the coalitions, and then bring the temperature down again. You'll get a new configuration. But there's a lot of frustration, I think, in America now, because the country is completely polarized, and people think, well, why can't we all work together and stuff? And well, it's annealed in that direction. That is quite a stable state, and it will stay for quite a long time. So there's, yeah. Did I explain that at all?
I got it, but I do have a question about earlier you said that a strategy might be to kind of try to break the symmetry. So if the ARG is going to do that, does that mean that all the projects of the ARG, or whatever they call the games, must favor one side? Because if it's just random and sometimes it favors one side and then the other, then it's not consistently breaking the symmetry. And also, I think it's in relation to those creation of the cults, because the cults are breaking away from, say, that the two-party or the two sides. So the more cults there are that try to break away from the two cults, it'll take longer to get into the breaking of the two. How do we kind of account for that? Must the ARG concentrate on just swinging it the one way, so that the one way is defeated, or so that it goes left or it goes right?
So okay, this is subtle, but imagine all the needles facing different directions and starting to form up into domains. If you say, well, the ARG should just force it in one direction or the other, so pick a direction, so try and make it go towards the left, you're just another needle. As soon as you do that, you will get your corresponding reaction. So what an ARG is really the next evolution. It's another meta layer on top of all the needles. So imagine, you see, the needles they're just dumb, and kind of like the electorate. They all just have an orientation that's like their ego. So let's call their native orientation is their ego. So if you just come in with an ego, somebody else's ego will react against yours and neutralize it. What an ARG is doing, or what a cult is doing, like this, is enlightened needles. So these needles have a brain, and so they actually neutral. So you see, if you have a neutral needle, then you can actually swing it any way, to break the symmetry. So then imagine it as the needle is just faking its magnetism. So if you, in this company, you fake your magnetism that way. If you're in that company, you fake your magnetism the other way. you just carry on doing that with two aims. One of them is the internal aim of getting people over their ego. So getting people that actually have a brain and don't just orient themselves randomly according to the ego. So if you get people transcending the ego, you get this new meta layer that kind of supervenes over all these dumbasses. So if you have that, then you say, well, which way do you make it break? Well, you have to be very careful to make sure that you don't decide. You have to kind of trust that ultimately the whole system is really pivoted on a feather. So it's really pivoted on kind of like a butterfly's wing. And if you basically take everybody, make sure that the orientation is so neutral that when butterfly's wing moment happens, everybody that has intelligence will swing rapidly. So then you swing out of deadlock. So okay, that it must be hard to understand. Did that make any sense?
Yes, I got it. We have to
Okay.
trust that the needles have brains.
Yeah, but you see, the really, really brainy needles, they try and stay on the razor's edge. It's like, Desiderata extinction, the Desiderata number 5, right? Is if you get loads and loads of people on the razor's edge, and then it doesn't matter. Either somebody will say break right, break left. They'll all. And it'll look like magic. It's like, where did that magnetism come from? It's like, well, it came from the ether. It came out of,
Right. And it's also not, like you said, not trying to control the outcome. It's just mirroring and serving as the mirror and
Yeah.
trusting that what needs to happen will happen.
Yes, it's really having a higher order. So if you think of the two-dimensional plane as the basic order where all the egos are, so if you have people on a higher order, enough people on a higher order, they can move very quickly in any direction. But they just need to accumulate more and more people on the higher order layer, so that all the dumbasses will follow. So think of it. Okay, let's try and ground it in some more concrete example. If everybody got over their ego, and you had a cult where everybody, that was the aim, to get over your ego and be enlightened, you still got people that are like Christians and Muslims and stuff like that. But, that can change on a dime. Basically snap your fingers, and it can become a cultural norm, so that anybody comes out with Christian shit or Judaism or, any kind of stuff like that. Instantly it'll become the norm to just say, shut the fuck up with that stupid shit. And people go, whoa, I can't be a Christian. No, you can't. Shut up. And it'll be like, oh, okay. And that's all it takes to get rid of Christianity. But you see, it can only happen when you have a number of people. You see, if you start off doing what I say, if everybody said, like, we need a bunch of people to start pulling this way and be like with Richard Dawkins and get the atheists, because atheists are going to save us because Christianity is bad and stuff. It's like, no, you've just got to, atheist here, you'll get the creationists. It's not, what you need is somebody to say, like, okay, I'm a Christian. And you fly under a false flag until basically everybody on the meta layer and the modern way, are you a fake Christian? Yeah. So like, how far are we to bring this down? Keep it going. So where you get is to 50%. You get 50% basically infiltration into the domain is very common. I'll tell you, 50% would be just a raw scattergun. You can be a lot smarter than that. But 50% then would be a tipping point if you just did a random scattergun. And then when everybody goes, say, are you ready to end this game? And then be like, yeah. And then you just, okay, new mode. Cut the bullshit mode. And all the other 50% would just go along. That's human nature, the bandwagon effects. You wouldn't, you see, if you're a Christian, you're a sheep. Nobody woke up in the morning, decided that they were a Christian, and when they were 3 years old, they were indoctrinated into it. So it means that they they're easily indoctrinated and they go with the flow. If the flow snaps on them rapidly, that's it. They'll change just as rapidly. So yeah, they'll have a one or two questions. So you can't, but people will adopt a new mode very quickly if they are in a cult. So if they identify with everybody in that cult. So I mean, say the Pope came out one day and said, like, okay, you know what? This Christian thing and this Catholic thing, it's a shit, this has been horrendous. So we're going to stop it now. So, and then explain the deal. I'm telling you, Catholics would pack it in overnight. And the same applies to everybody. So, but now it doesn't have to be 50%, because what are these social networks? They scale-free networks. What they mean is they have Pareto distribution. It means that 20% of the nodes have 80% of the connections. So there's a power law, and you'll find that 20% of the nodes are controlling the other 80%. The other 80% don't have enough connections or enough weights to actually set the beat. In other words. So if you can find those 20% nodes, the 20% can control the 80%. What's really interesting is, because it's scale free, the 20% also, it's the same rule. 20% of the 20% is also controlling the 20%. So you can go, keep on going down the road until eventually you find some guy in Poughkeepsie who's controlling the whole world. So those guys that you see the reason. Yeah, I mean, the general way people think of influencers is they're fooled by appearances. So they think, the guy on center stage, they think is the guy who's the big influencer. It's not true. It's the really powerful people. Now we're talking about being neutral. Remember how I was saying we'd be neutral? The real power is in that kind of neutrality. Well, it's the Eminence Gris, the gray cardinals behind the big man. The big man is a fool. He's always a fool. He's always an idiot. It's the guys who control the fool. They're the powerful ones, because they can outlive the fool. They can get rid of him. They can do anything. But all the sheep, they look at this fool. And so anybody that knows anything tries to be, the controller of the fool. So they try to be kingmakers. Nobody with a brain would try and be a king. So you get situations like throughout history, like say the king, that one of the most powerful positions in a monarchy like Britain was the master of the stool. Now, stool means shit. It means shit. It means master of the shit. So, like, how can the master of the shit be one of the most powerful positions in England? Well, the master of the stool was the guy who, like, helped the king take a shit. He'd wipe his ass and stuff like that. He would basically go into the privy chamber, into the toilet with the king, basically sit there, holding the, not toilet roll. They didn't have toilet roll in those days, but generally, basically attend to the king while he's taking a crap, and then wipe his ass for him afterwards. Now, why was that such a powerful position? Because if you're such an intimate with the king, and you can sit there for hours. I mean, when the king wants a little break from all these arseholes at court, then he can go and, the only privacy he gets is on the can. So he goes and sits in the can there, just trying to get a bit of privacy. And then the master of the privy stool would have him there privately, and he could, just on the basis of just having a wee chat, he could have tremendous influence on the king. So people. I mean, in more enlightened times, then people fought fiercely for that position of master of the privy stool. Nowadays, we're all dumbed down to oblivion. So now people are not so subtle, and now they think, I've got to be the lead. I've got to be the center stage. No, that's the stupidest position of all. So they were much wiser in times past. We've dumbed down incredibly. But yeah, I hope that gives you some color on if you're the lever behind the lever. If you believe, so in other words, if you have one of the small preferential nodes that nobody notices. So in other words, okay, let's take the scale-free network. If you take the 20% of the nodes and 20% of those nodes, then you can still go another, and then 20% of those, and then at some stage you find, well, this node is really, really important. Might be the king or not, but there's 1 degree removed from that, and it's, you'll have 5 or 6 nodes that have maybe only one connection, and if they work together, they can control that master node. So you see what I mean? Because if you looked at the network, you would look, if you were a dumbass and you just looked at the network and how it was connected, you would look at this preferential node and you'd say, oh, this is the node that controls the entire network. And the reason you'd say it is because there's this big node hyper-connected, and you wouldn't notice that there were like 5 or 6 little, nodes that were connected, with one graph, with one edge. So they would just have, one connection to the master node. And you'd say, well, those are not important. Well, yeah, but imagine if they worked together. So in other words, if the master node, so the king, had 5 gray cardinals, and they all worked in concert. So they all made sure they gave the same input to the king. Now the king is kind of a quorum sensing. He's got a quorum sensing algorithm. So he just takes the information that's coming through and he says, okay, it looks like the majority thinks this, but if 5 people work together that are close connected to the king, they can make him feel that, they can bias the king because he feels that, these 5 are overrepresented in terms of, he doesn't know the 5 are working together, right? So, okay, I feel like I'm not explaining this very well, but okay, I'll give you another example. So I knew a guy in America. He actually mentored me for a long while, and he was one of these preferential nodes, and so I looked very closely at what he did, and his name was Tom. So I looked at him closely, and I saw that he, what he did was very important. If he said something, he would have tremendous influence in Washington and in certain sectors in the healthcare industry and stuff. So I wondered, so many people wanted to influence him and stuff. And I said, I wondered what he did. So I watched him carefully, and I saw that he seemed to have a pattern. And the pattern was, if he got, if he found something was really important information, he would sit on it. But if he heard it from 3 different sources that he trusted, that would tip him and he would start propagating the information. So I said to him one day that, I said, is that what you're doing? And he said, yeah, you nailed me. How did you know? I said, well, I just watched you. And I could see that you were doing this pattern. So I said to him, well, did you know that more important than the stuff that you actually propagate, if you actually do the math, do some network modeling, you'll see that he as a preferential node, right? If he takes the input from, say, 3 people before he propagates that, if that's his rule for propagating information, it's actually not as powerful in terms of the effect on the network as blocking 3 people. So if there was 3 bits of information that he broke his rule and decided not to propagate, that would ultimately have more effect on the network than actually propagation. So in other words, as a filter, as a block, he's more powerful than actually just a transmitter. So yeah, when I told him that, he was kind of blown away, and he came back later and said, yeah, he thinks that I was right. But yeah, it gives you an idea of, I hope what I'm doing is I'm giving you an idea of how to be a subtle node in the network and how to actually foment change. So the thing is to actually recruit neutrality and get in a position where people are at a fulcrum, but in the kind of gray zone. The most interesting stuff happens in the neutral gray zone. That's where all the action is. Now, most people think it's all in the limelight. It's not. There's almost no action in the limelight because it's already preordained. By the time things get to the limelight and all the big heroes and stuff, they've already been decided. So those people in the limelight are not decision makers. But the world thinks they are because they don't understand how this stuff works. Now, this is not only in social networks. This is also in your brain. So, the reason why they say, well, there's no free will, because, they can look in an fMRI scan, they can look at your brain, and they can tell how a decision is made 7 seconds. 7 seconds before you think you've made that decision. Why? Because your alien cortex is like the 20% preferential nodes, if you like. And so by the time it tips over and it thinks, well, I'm in the I'm in the limelight, so I'm the king. The king made the decision. No, the decision was made by all the people behind the king and the key players, and in particular the key players that were kind of enlightened. So in other words, that weren't playing the same game as everybody else. Everybody else kind of imagined it as an ego game where they're all butting heads. And these guys are not butting heads. They don't have a line to push. So the most powerful position of all is if you're completely amoral. If you don't get stuck into ethics and all these things which make people tip left or right, is you say, nah, it's bullshit. Just in the absolute neutrality in the gray area. Why is where all the action is? Why the action is there is because that's the most subtle thing. So the people that understand all this and are working at that level, they will have titanic battles in the gray zone. That's almost like starfish fighting or something. You have to get time-lapse photography or something to see it going on. The average person can't see it because they're blinded by the fool in the limelight. So yeah, but there are. Okay, so now that I've introduced you to this, then you can see that behind the scenes, the key to the conspiracy theories and stuff is there are lots of people that actually know what I'm saying, and so they duking it out behind the scenes to before some dope like Biden who doesn't have 2 brain cells to rub together. Then it's like Biden decided this and Biden's just a puppet, I mean, not like people conventionally say, oh, he's controlled. It's literally is controlled by, people that know how to control people. So yeah, so if you can see them sometimes, but in general, if they're pretty good at playing this game, you won't see their influence. It's very, very subtle. So yeah. Hopefully I've explained to you now why liberals are so wrong when they say, oh, it's, not conspiracy theories and AOC's changing things. Like, oh, horseshit. Absolute horseshit. They're looking at people that really have no power, that really are puppets. So yeah, the point of this is not to say, oh, conspiracy. The point is to say, like, this is the secret to how enlightened people gain power. So okay, take that as another example as well. You can say, well, not only are the people behind the throne not really in power, you can say, well, the whole court, the whole of Washington and everything is in the limelight. So as well that basically the real power is outside of Washington. Nobody in their right mind would go into the cockpit. So yeah, that's how secret organizations work, and that's how a powerful cult will work. So yeah, there you go. We did cults 101. We did a bit of networking. explain how domains work. It's a pity nobody listens to these. So yeah, now it's difficult because, you know, so you take somebody like Roger Hallam and Gail Bradley. They kind of like, they're not smart enough to listen to real influencers, and they are clearly influenced by people that they don't realize. Yeah. So I mean, I would say that, you know, I would love to know how they got to meet you know, Chenoweth and Erica Chenoweth and stuff, but I would presume they were coaxed into that. And the aim was simple. It was to make the organization non-violent, and then, you know, once it was established as a emphatically non-violence organization, then it becomes a bleed. You know, they can bleed off all the passions of the youth, and it becomes, you know, a dumping ground for just a diversion. They just sidetrack everybody and nullify them that way. And I think that's probably what happened to Exxon.
Yeah. Do you think it was also the money that was, like, they were giving us a seed money from whoever influenced them? So that may have played a part.
The money is it. See, you can always tell where the money came from. So you see, what the guys do behind the scenes is they don't start these organizations. They don't, you know, they like let 1,000 poppies grow or whatever. They wait for them to come up. So there are lots and lots of people like Roger and Gail, but they will watch them, and they'll decide which ones suit their purposes best, and then they'll start feeding money to them. So, you know, it's yeah, you could take them for right old suckers. If Roger and Gail were smarter, they could take them for right old suckers, because they could do the pretend thing. They could basically say, we are the absolute goody two shoes, perfect thing. We'll support the Green New Deal. We'll go for, you know, green tech, and we'll be non-violent, and we'll do the most vanilla protest known to man. And then basically money would pour into them, especially from, you know, you see Gail in front of HSBC and stuff like that. Oh God, I could make my skin crawl. But the money would pour in if they did that, and then they could do movement building and then turn the movement on a dime. So you know, basically it would take some skill, because you've got to, you know, bring people to that point. But it's very possible that that kind of seeding organizations and can backfire very badly if the person, you know, basically the main guy like Roger Hallam, if he's a smart bastard, they could whipsaw on you. But the thing is, because a movement like XR is kind of weak, it's ideologically weak in terms of the Ising spin model, all the compass needles, all the they are vulnerable to movement jacking. So you know, a more enlightened movement, a more enlightened cult, or they are a cult. I mean, everything's a cult, but a more enlightened cult could easily game jack them, and that happens frequently in revolutions and stuff throughout history.
Right. So it would be, yeah, I wouldn't underestimate those organizations. I think they, to some extent, do their research. I mean, look at what happened to Greta, right? Isn't she another person that they seeded money? You know, I'm sure you talked in your videos about Greta too.
Yeah, it's that Norwegian guy, whatever his name is, that Norwegian green billionaire. He manufactured it out of nothing, out of whole cloth.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is subtle. Yeah, we gotta.
Yeah, and then basically, you know, after he's finished with it, they put it down. But just think how dangerous that game is. If they lost control of Greta, they'd be in real trouble. So, yeah, but you know, they never did. but it's yeah. So I think that's possibly the end of the Greta story. She's gone back to school and stuff, but she could have become Joan of Arc if they weren't careful.
Right. Okay. Interesting stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I hope people, you know, at least one or two people out here listen to this kind of stuff and wise up enough to make a difference. So the thing is, again, it's not to get any particular outcome. You don't want to say, oh, you know, the master plan is to make sure the Nazis don't get into power, or we make sure that we do green initiatives or something like that. All of those are kind of fool's errands. Ultimately, you must think of it like a birthing process, and you're just a catalyst to accelerate which way it's actually going to go. So you know, even in your own mind, you shouldn't really have a desire for the outcome. You just have trust that the outcome, you know, would, left to itself, like kind of life will find a way, and you know, we kind of team humanity and pro-life. And you say, if you basically provide the lubricant and the catalyst, then it will break in the necessary way. And so you don't you're not on any side. You're just on the side of life and humanity. No political orientation. It's just weak. It's weak. And anyway, what does it matter? Have you ever found any one of these things that actually work? Find one ideology. Communism, you know, socialism, like National Socialism, and that they all don't work because they're partial. And so if you run them to their conclusion, just try it. Just do, you can do your own Hegelian dialectic on them, and just do a thought experiment for where they go. And you'll see it goes the same place that every, you know, student argument in a dorm of a few beers gets to at 4 in the morning. It comes back exactly to the same freaking place it started. That's the nature of the logic. It's a closed hermeneutic seal. And so basically it will just come out. So you take anything, take wokeism or something to its logical conclusion. Take communism to its logical conclusion. It looks like the opposite. So you know, if you mention the horseshoe theory of politics, then especially on the left, people vomit. Because they love their egos, and they like to think that they're on this path to some destination. And you say, you're on the same, if you pursue it, you'll wind up in exactly the same place as a libertarian.
Leah Keith mentioned it last week, and
I was so damn pleased. Yeah, I was actually kind of stunned, because the one thing that I consistently get resistance to is the horseshoe theory, and it just seems so damn obvious to me. And let me say one more thing about that. In terms of the domains, going back to the domains and the Ising model. Okay, now think of it this way: each one of those domains, say that all the compass needles are, you know, at 270 degrees or like 10 degrees or whatever. You know, call that an ego or a self with a little s. Okay, so what all these things are doing, political parties, all these kind of coalitions, they are really discovering themselves with a small s. So if you look at the discovery of themselves, it's not like people think. People think that it's all monolithic. And so if you, for example, take some ideology, say conservatives, right? And you say, well, conservatives are the opposite of, you know, say communists. Then you start out like this and you say, no, I don't see it at all. I say, why? Well, if you go to Texas, where the people are Christian conservatives and stuff, and look at them, I'll tell you, I'll find more communism on a Sunday afternoon in Texas than you'll ever seen in Russia during the Soviet era. And what I mean is, you can go around to a church fete, people will be helping each other with their, helping a neighbor with their roof. They will be doing a potluck at the church, and nobody would take payment at all. They're all mutualists helping each other out. They are absolute freaking communists. They help each other. But where do they draw the boundary? They draw the boundary of the people that are in their church parish, or the guys that have this, maybe a little bit more people that have the same skin color as me, something like. But you see how their boundaries disintegrate fast. But that where they're communists around their self, and their self is in Texas. It's like it's my church, But within that church, they're extreme communists. So then communists come along and say, "Oh, these guys are the enemy because they're individualists and stuff." And you say, "Well, what's the difference?" Well, the communists are idealistic Marxists. They're really saying the self is everybody. So the self is the entire world population, all colors and creeds and stuff. And they're saying we all must behave like conservatives in a Texas church on a global scale. But the only difference is the size of what they're calling themselves. So it's the vision of self is the breakdown. So again, you have this thing about, oh, Nazis are not socialists. They're socialists in name only. That's the cant on the left side. Horseshit, really. The Nazis are national socialists, exactly what they said. So you say, now people's hair gets on fire and they explode and stuff because, they say, no, Nazis are the exact opposite to what we... No, they're the same thing except for national. So Hitler said that the folkish movement, that's the folk, the people, the self, said the folkish movement is National Socialism, is Nazism. And he said Nazism is the folkish movement. So he said there's no difference. But the folkish movement saying it's all blood and soil was the case. It's basically saying if you're German and you wear Lederhosen and you grew up with a pine tree and yodeling with Heidi and stuff, tender goats, then you are authentic German and you're part of the self. Then within that self, the guys are immaculate socialists. So always in all these ideologies, it comes down to where they draw the boundary of self. And I think that's where the problem of the horseshoe theory comes in. But now say, well, where do we, enlightened people draw the boundary of self? And you say, well, it's transcendent. It's beyond all those people's conception of self. It's beyond the collective humans' idea of self. So even the communists fall down because they say, oh, well, we're all big one family and we should all be egalitarian, and they're all very intellectual about it in this conception of this ideology. But what they miss is they end the boundary of self at humanity. And so they're rotten ecologists. If you go to the Soviet Union and stuff, they just strip mining, and the Soviet Union was awful for the ecology, the world's ecology, and Russia in particular. The reason is because they were obsessed with this boundary of self around humanity, and say, well, no, come on, man. What about the bears and the fish, and the trees?
Wow, that's really profound. It's really profound and spiritual and ecological at the same time. The boundaries of the self.
Yeah.
Who are we? What are we? And how far do we extend?
That's why Desiderata #1 is know thyself.
Yeah. Well, DGR, I think they're in the right direction. Bright Green Light, they kind of get into it's more than just humanity. So,
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
But it's not even something you reflect on. It's something you know. You know.
Well, you know it by getting rid of all the shit. You
Yeah.
know it by getting all the. Basically, you say, you know, am I a communist? No. I mean, I can get rid of communism.
But I mean, the inclusion of things that are beyond the self is something that you know. Is a person of the Communist Party in Soviet Union who decided to strip the land and to had not accessed something that is obvious normally to the self, to humans, to us. And I mean that's that concept I meant is well, we wouldn't be here if it was not obvious. We wouldn't be talking together if this wasn't obvious.
Okay, it's obvious, but it's denied. So you can only get to it with a long process of reason and deduction. So what you're saying is absolutely true, but it's the overlay. It's the overlay we put on top of it. So we've talked ourselves out of exactly what you know. And the only way to get back to it is with a kind of cognitive therapy, where you have to reason your way back to that. And that's the process of neti, not neti. It's not this, not this. So you have to, because basically the devil has introduced this into the world, you have to deal with it. You cannot just say, well, we'll wish ourselves back to Eden. We have eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the only way forward is you reason out good and evil until it's exhausted. It's the only way you can get back once you've lost your innocence. You can't just wish your innocence back again. So you have to do a process of philosophy to get back to the truth.
Yeah. And I think part of that denial is especially people living in cities and in civilization, we're separated from nature. We don't see all that strip mining. I mean, just reading that book, Bright Green Lies, I really recommend it. They really go into detail.
I've
Man.
actually asked Leah, there's a website, she recommends
Oh, yeah.
2 websites to get the book. It's easier, I think, because it doesn't go into
things that I don't see at all because I'm so far away from the dams, the habitats that are being destroyed.
So you're not actually, you're not they hide all this shit. I was
exactly.
I lived in Tiburon, right? In San Francisco. And across the bay, there was this group called the Durutti Construction. They built the extension for the San Francisco airport. So basically, this dual runway. It's basically like Heathrow expansion for English people, and it was done out into the San Francisco Bay. Now I was kind of curious. I thought, like, where the fuck did they get all this fucking building material? Because I realized it must be a fucking must be a disaster, of ecological disaster. So I happened to commute on the ferry, so it was kind of easy. I managed to figure out where these barges were coming from, and they were coming right across the bay, right from Redondo, not Redondo, Mill Valley, just right there in Mill Valley. Oh, what are you talking about? So then I we did a little family excursion to go and find out. And there is this huge mother big crater, like it's like the size of San Francisco, that they've hidden right next to this freaking park. You can see it on Google Earth, in San Rafael. And so I thought, how is this possible? This is prime real estate that they just gouged out, and then it didn't cost them a lot because they just put it on barges went to San Francisco airport and dumped it, and so I thought, how did this happen? I went back and looked at it, they got planning permission from all the guys in San Rafael because they just weren't honest. They planted all these trees and they built up this whole these burns and stuff so nobody could see the thing. And then they got planning permission through the council and stuff. They just paid for golf courses and shit like that, and then they bought off the local people and told them that they were landscaping. Then they did the park next door. They did this tiny little park, nice park, but it was just 1/10 of their land. And then they just took 9/10 and just fucking went through. They went through the fucking water table. So they got to. I'll just finish this little story off with telling you about it. The final irony is either they weren't going to fill it back in or do anything. And so I was thinking maybe I should start a campaign to say, like, make the bastards fill it in. If they had to fill it in, they would have gone bust. You see, that's how all these mining things work. If they had to restore what they damaged, they wouldn't have made the profit. They would actually be in debt. And that's everything. That's everything. That's everything on our whole planet. It's all false accounting. So, Bill Gates and all these guys and Elon Musk say, we're going to, do electric cars and we're going to mine titanium and stuff. What they're not saying is if Elon Musk paid for what a Tesla is worth, in other words, if he had to really restore these mining, he says, yeah, we'll all restore them and stuff. Horseshit. They're not going to restore those things. They're just going to basically cover over a bit of mess. They're just going to basically sweep on what they've done under the carpet. But if they did clean those things up, then the Tesla would cost millions. And they don't tell you that. So basically what they're doing is they're defrauding future generations to get a Tesla out now, and then they tell you it's green. But that Desiderata group, I'll just finish the story of telling you the final thing about. So the Desiderata group, once I found this mother big hole, I realized they can't dig anymore. The San Francisco airport was finished. And I thought, this is a business opportunity, because there's this huge thing that it was like an amphitheater, a monster thing, like an amphitheater, and it was filling up with water in the center. So there was a small cut where the guys came, basically loaded up the barges. And I thought, hang on a minute. If you just, make a small channel there, you could make a yacht basin. You could basically, all this amphitheater, you could put a wonderful village, like a Greek village. It could be the fucking best thing in San Francisco. So I started down this path and try and get the land and stuff, or find out what the Desiderata group would do. When they heard that I knew about the fucking hole, they did their nut. And basically, yeah, they did everything they could to basically stop it. They said that there's no way in fucking hell that they would sell that land and, basically just try to shut me out. But the weird thing is, you can see this monster if you look on Google Earth. It's just they're very clever how they planted. They did landscaping and beautified it all in a rim right on the ridge. And so nobody in San Rafael right there knows that this has been done on their doorstep. Now the same applies to you down there in LA and stuff. Is the lakes and stuff. It's like Mulholland. He went round from lake to lake, just basically building a pipe, which is like a big straw, to San Francisco. It just drained the lake. Absolutely, went one after another. And the biggest dust bowl in the world, it actually changes the climate. It's so fucking big. But it's this fine talc powder that comes out of, there near Mount Baldy. I can't remember what the blasted thing is called. But now it's just a huge pan. And when the wind gets up, the thing goes right into the stratosphere and circles the Earth. Now that environmental disaster was Mulholland, just because he drained the water out. But Mulholland went all the way around, getting further, the cheapest water first, obviously. He went all the way until he got to Lake Tahoe. And he was about to drain Lake Tahoe. And then even the worst of these capitalists said, whoa, dude, not Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe is the most pristine alpine lake in the world.
But Mike was saying that when people live in urban settings, they're absolutely unaware of what's going on. And now that there's more than 50%, I'd say, well, nearly 50% of the planet And in certain countries, it's probably 70 or 80% of people who live in urban centers. This awareness, this is a word I don't like. But this knowledge is completely lost to most people. That's why you find the block when you talk to people about ecocide and environmental murder and assassination of the natural world. And yeah, I've started Bright Green New Lies. Bright. Oh, Jesus, I'm too tired to say anything today. But yeah, I've started it, and I feel the anger in the book. Huh? Yeah.
I see it too.
Well, I must tell you something about America, because you probably don't understand the mindset in America.
No,
And
not
where the phrase.
not a bit. No.
The funny thing about, Mike, correct me if you don't agree, but the funny thing about the mindset in America, Americans have a very, very funny, strange relationship with nature. So you know, it's hard to describe, but I'll okay. So going back to Lake Tahoe, you know, the most pristine alpine lake in the world. It's just beautiful, and but if you go up there, I was incensed. I went up there and I was swimming with the kids and stuff, and you just get, you know, person after person just coming past in like this bit of machinery, any bit of machinery, you know, a jet bike or a speedboat or anything, and then bam, 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 and it's, you know, it's beautifully quiet and tranquil. It's just fucking heaven. And these guys are going to beat it to death. They actually feel, I think Americans feel challenged by death. There's something deeply psychologically, they're antagonistic towards like Mother Nature. So they're almost purposely beating her to death. It's kind of like mommy issues. It runs so deep. And so they left an oil slick, you know, they're leaving an oil slick. I can't, in Europe, they wouldn't let a single motorized thing on this lake. But in America, it's like they're leaving freaking oil slicks and stuff.
It's changing in Europe too. People are becoming murderers too, like that. They were the last. It's changed in the last 20 years. I recognize what you say. The behavior what you ascribe to the Americans. I'm starting to see it in a lot of Europeans and in general too.
But we're going mal psychotic. We're going mal psychotic. So they can't stand the silence. The guys, they'll crank up the music. They'll crank up the volume. The noise pollution is going up because they fear the silence.
Yeah,
it's chronic psychological problem that's being unaddressed.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way I think to tackle it is you know, to start a group like this. Again, it's like you say, awareness. You know, you want to vomit when you hear that. But it really is awareness, not the kind of awareness they talking about, like, you know, well, awareness of planetary destruction is like, XR's awareness of planetary destruction is not real. It's coming secondhand from David Attenborough and stuff, and it's all polished.
And it's all neurosis.
Yeah, it's all sentimentality, and it's got nothing at all really to do with nature. But the awareness you're talking about is the awareness of nature, not awareness of polar bears, the awareness of actually being out in the wild and being able to hear your heartbeat, or, you know, the stuff that Derek and Leah talks about. So, and just, you know, the only way you can get to that is being comfortable with yourself, you know, and so there's a long route back, but we're getting further away and faster. So the more people spend time in virtual reality and these simulators and in these games and online and listening to all the stuff I put out on XRMade, which is like high volume stress stuff, the more they are struggling, or the more detached they're becoming from nature. So yeah, the reason I put stuff out there is because to get you to, you know, dissociate psychologically. But what if we ever got enough people together and enough people going on a project like this, what you'd aim to do is to wean people off this stuff and get them back to sanity, which is to nature and silence, and so they could actually feel the sattva and get it. They're slaves to rajas and tamas. So tamas, because tamas is like gravity or lethargy. Hey, hi, Torsten. And rajas is this running around, this completely frenetic, busy stuff. What we all do in the Western world, we're proud of it. Basically, if somebody says to you like, "Oh, I can't meet you then, I'm busy," they win. It's like whoever has the fullest schedule can like put the other person down. And so we love rajas so much in the West, but it's absolutely binding us and keeping us away from sattva. And until you can break the lethargy of tamas and just the frenetic hypnotization. So rajas is like hypnotization. It's just people are fascinated. So they're fascinated with technology, and they're fascinated with entertainment, and they're fascinated with spectacle. And what it's costing them is the sattva. They're getting further and further away. So now people have chronic deficits. They cannot sit still for long. They cannot shut down the voice in their head. They can't sit in nature without being disturbed. There was, I remember, yeah, just to give you an indication of how fucked up we've become, is when I was at school, we spent all our time out in nature. I grew up, spending all my time out on the veldt and stuff, and it was true for most boys, I think, that grew up. We didn't have television, and so there wasn't television in the country till 1975. The first time I got television, I was 15, television in the home, and then it was only on for 2 hours a day. So that was a different era. That was a different way of growing up. So I remember this thing when we were at school. We were horrified. All us boys were absolutely horrified by this. Now, hopefully, you can see why we were horrified, and see how far we've gone. We were told this story about one of the early pioneers, the voortrekkers that came from Holland. And so they came on a ship. They were reading the diary of this woman. And she came, from Amsterdam on a ship, uncomfortable voyage and seasickness, gets to the Cape, beautiful Cape and everything like that. But then the thing that absolutely appalled us was this piece that she wrote about where she came over, she's in a wagon, she came over this mountain pass and just had this huge vista in front of her. Just, the purple mountains and these huge plains, which is, South Africans go almost choke because the walls are too close and the sky is too low in Europe. And if South Africans miss more than anything those large distances with the purple mountains and stuff. So when she saw that, she broke down and cried. And we were like, no, wait, what? What are you talking about? So the teacher explained to us that she came from Holland where everything was close and narrow and stuff. And so she's, the teacher said, like, you have to understand what she felt, that this vast open expanse she just felt like nothing. She just felt small and insignificant, and so much so that she burst into tears. And we were outraged. We were like,
the way to feel, the natural way to feel when you're in nature.
Yeah, we were so outraged because we said, like, how can people live in cities and get to that point where the oxygen of life and those distances and the blue mountain, which we thought was life, and you say it's kind of like we were so appalled that you could get a domesticated chimp and do this to a chimp in a city. And so, yeah, I just share that with you, but we're talking the 17th century, so they were already fucked up by that stage.
No, because I get years ago when I was still when I was still working, I used to get those people who would where I live. It's very wild, and it can be You can see nobody sometimes for a long time, and this vast expanses of ocean and mountains and bog. And I had some people who had to come here working for either a government agency or police or medical or whatever, sent from the city, who regularly broke down in the winter because the silence, the darkness, and at night in the winter, and also the huge the huge expanse of nature, they would have breakdowns. They'd have to be sent back to the city. They couldn't stick it.
But
They were completely
it's tragedy.
and the cities in Ireland are small compared to what you have in certain places of Europe. But even those people they couldn't adjust.
But here's the tragedy: is we're going into a situation where I feel that anybody in a city, they're in trouble. People are gonna have to abandon cities, I think, and it's not long. and so you imagine the psychological problems. People are going to top themselves left and right. So I mean, yeah, I say, just if you're talking about crisis risk management, get out of a city. Your biggest favor you can do to yourself is start to wean yourself off the city before the big rush. Because even if I'm wrong and collapse doesn't happen,
it's like a drug. There is a long period of weaning, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you will top yourself. You will not be able to go cold turkey fast if you don't learn to like nature and learn to like being outdoors, or a bit of isolation and stuff. If you don't learn to like it, if it catches up to you in a rush, you're in trouble, man. I'm telling you, you'll top yourself. So
the real suicide in those conditions.
Yeah,
a lot of people.
So I'll tell you what will happen to you, and I'll tell you why you'll top yourself. Is because in those really desolate areas, real deserts and things like that, you have to face yourself. You have to face what goes on in your head. So my school teacher used to say, my headmaster was. I don't think I'll dox myself here, but anyway. Yeah, he was in the Battle of El Alamein, and he had a lot of. It was obviously a big deal in his mind, but he said he waxed on about the Sahara Desert and stuff a lot to us boys, and he said one of the things that he found amazing was that you have auditory hallucinations. He said the silence in the desert. He said he would hear his school bell. We had a school bell, and he hand drum. Slave bell. It was literally a slave bell, and he said that he as an adult he would hear his school bell ringing loud, and there's just an auditory hallucination, and those things happen a lot. So much so that Aleister Crowley would go out into the Sahara just to confront all these demons, and they're really interesting stuff. Like he says one story with this guy who just came over the sand dunes and just attacked him physically, and he wrestled with the guy, and wrestled hard, kind of like, who's the guy in the Bible that did that? I can't remember who the guy is who wrestled in the Bible.
Jacob, or
it was Jacob,
somebody
wasn't
else?
it? Yeah, but exactly the same thing as Jacob. Basically wrestled this guy almost to a standstill, and then the guy just up and ran away again as quickly as he had arrived. And that kind of thing is very common. It's called a jinn in Egypt, like a demon or a ghost. But you talk to anybody that's gone out into Joshua in California, or basically in Indiana and stuff, and the canyons and stuff, and if you spend enough time there without people that jabber all the time, you will also hear people say stuff like that they have those kind of encounters. And those kind of encounters, you're encountering your own demons. You're manifesting your own demons. You'll never. I've said before, when all this, if you get deep enough into this stuff, you will gaslight yourself at some stage, and that kind of shit, like Aleister Crowley, will happen to you. I guarantee it. But here's the thing: you have to just take it for as it is, right? You'll never be able to decide. Like Aleister Crowley, imagine him. He could never say whether this was a demon that manifested himself and came, or it was just some demented guy who lived in the desert, or whether he was hallucinating. You'll never be able to say. You just look back and it just say it's weird. But you should expect that kind of thing and not be freaked out about it. It's part of this work. I just want to warn you, because see, if people get into this too deeply, they go until they get gaslit, and then they go. As soon as they gaslit, they freak out and run for the hills. I'm saying, I've said so many times, you can't do that. You will be really sorry if you do that. And it's unfortunate now, because in that Stephen Hazen critique, that long 3.5 hour thing I did, he raises that with cults. That they say, oh, the cult tells you can't leave, otherwise bad things will happen to you. And then I'm just doing that now. But you see, he dropped out of a cult. He's a failed cult member. And the cults are actually right. I mean, I'm sure there are guys that abuse it. And he was saying, oh, some guys try and run you down with a car. But it's much funnier than he'll let on. I'm sure he knows that if the guys that get run down by a car, it's a lot more complicated than you think. You'll never get to the bottom of a story like that if you try. So I'll give you an example. So then, say this story that he said with some guy, trying to leave a cult, and they said, something bad will happen to you, you'll get run over by a car, and then they are. That is psychological, right? So you will never find out whether the cult actually tried to run the person down, which is a possibility. You will never find out if psychologically, just kind of like a Freudian slip with a kind of a death wish, people will, walk in front of a car unintentionally. All of these psychological, because you're getting so deep into the psychology, all these things will come up, and you will never be able to decide, was it the cult members and were they being malicious, or was it the person that walked in front of a car by accident? Was it synchronicity that the person just, subliminally saw a cult member in the car and, stepped out in front of them because of psychological reasons? All of those things could be possible, but you'll never find out. But there's such crashing synchronicity and stuff that that it comes with the territory, and it's spooky, and people get gaslit. And all I can say is just rise above it and just say, hey, this is weird territory. After a while, you get used to this weird territory, and eventually you get comfortable with it. Eventually you get like me and seek it out. But there's a big underground subculture of people that do this. They're young people that go into haunted places and do kind of Blair Witch Project things. They record it and stuff and freak themselves out. So yeah,
been doing this when we were teenagers, even in the 70s.
yeah,
And
it still goes on.
yeah. Before TV.
I heard about
Yeah.
the stalkers in the Chernobyl zone. Like, they just go in there. You heard about them? The stalkers?
No,
Like
tell
those
us.
people. There's a documentary, I saw it a while back, but there's like a zone you can't enter in Chernobyl, right? So they just go in. Like there's these groups of people that go in and they just hang out there for a week or 2 weeks, and I mean, it's all wilderness, right? And yeah, they have a thrill in that, just going into that Chernobyl zone.
So in that video that I was critiquing, there's this woman that says she's Two-Spirit, right? From First Nation, you know, and the Dakota Access Pipeline stuff she was talking about. She said a whole lot of stuff there which was completely off message, but it didn't really come across. I don't think the other guys knew what she was saying. What she said in there, she says that you're getting all these guys who are LARPing, and they're these cults and stuff, and they're coming into these movements, and she says, and they try. The reason is they're trying to take over hard to reach places. Those hard to reach places, she means paranormal places. So what the guys are doing is the same as the guys in Chernobyl. Is if you go and do that stuff, they're really psychonauts. They're trying to accumulate, you know, these kind of spiritual experiences. And there's lots of people in America doing it too. But if you go to an old, you know, Indian burial ground, or you go to Skinwalker Ranch or something, that's what they're doing, is they're mining all of that stuff. And then now all the First Nation people and stuff, they hate it because it's cultural appropriation and stuff. And yeah, but that's what she was talking about. But it was off message, because what the other guys were trying to say was, oh, all of these things are crazy. All these people are in you know, QAnon are nuts. And, you know, we're all rational. And then she was coming out with this. What she was saying was undermining the whole thing, saying that basically, no, this shit is real. There's spooks out there. It's like, shut the fuck up. We're trying to say QAnon is full of shit. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I should have made more out of that.
Yeah. So was she referring to the Iglesia Ni Cristo? Those were they trying to? Okay, now I understand.
Because if you go, I mean, you know, like if you just go a bit south and you get to like the Day of the Dead and all of these graveyards, you see all these guys were heavily into it when the conquistadors and the missionaries and stuff came around. It never goes away. Those guys are still living in a different psychological landscape. Is again talking about that you'll never get to the bottom of this is a thing of like, yeah, I want to try and be a bit edgy and paint the picture. Don't be too rational about this stuff. There is weird shit out there. There's seriously weird shit. So think of it like Everett. I pondered a lot about David Everett. You know, Everett went to the Piraha, and he studied them. He was the first to translate the language. He spent 22 years as a Christian missionary, and talks a lot about these kind of things. And one of the things that was really fascinating to him was that the Piraha could see ghosts, and he couldn't. And he gave one instance of where they were at this river, and they see this, you know, ghost across on the other side of the river. They all could see it, and he couldn't see it. And he didn't have an explanation. You know, they can all see it. They can all describe the same thing without transferring notes. They can all see it, but it's not visible to him. And it's saying, if you are James Randi and these kind of guys and an arch skeptic, you won't be able to see it. Now that sounds like double talk and stuff, but I was like, man, I've tried this shit. You see, it's the same thing. It was like, I've been down this road. You try and take photographs of this. You see, people say, like, like Skinwalker Ranch, if you have a look at that, you'll see there's this guy called Bigelow, and he tried this path. He tried to get all this paranormal activity and stuff on film and use electronics, and it just wouldn't work. He wouldn't get it right. The camera would jam, the thing would just, and I've done it too. And exactly the same thing. You will never get the technology to work, so you get a picture of Bigfoot or something like that. But it's very funny what happens when you try. One of the things I noticed was equipment malfunction and energy. Basically, the batteries will die. You'll never get the... To get out into those areas of paranormal activity, you've got to be out basically off grid enough to have batteries. As soon as you have batteries, you're on an energy budget, and you're kind of juggling this budget. You'll never get it together to get it. And so that's the one thing. And the other thing is I've taken some pictures which I thought, this is going to be dynamite, and then I can't find them again. You can't index them on the computer. Basically, they get lost in so much noise. Eventually, you got I got so many files on the computer that when I go to find it, it's just like not. So you try and defeat that problem. You say, well, I'll upload it to the internet. I'll stream it to the internet and stuff. And it'll one way or another, you won't get back to it. But I just say all of this stuff just mainly so that if it happens to you, you're a bit calmer and you don't freak out. But a lot of the stuff that they say is apophenia, and therefore entirely illegitimate in their point of view, it's a little bit reductionist. If you go back and look at those 4chan guys and stuff, what they were doing, especially in like 2016, you remember the stuff with Keck the Frog and stuff like that? Those were guys were going into the Egyptology, and they were seeing connections everywhere. That all over they would get these synchronicities with numbers and Kabbalah and things, and so yeah, they believed that they manifested Keck the Frog, which was an ancient Egyptian god. And then the Keck the Frog, the feels bad man meme. And so,
no.
Yeah, the green frog. That's
Pepe.
Pepe, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And then it all came out of 4chan, and they all, from this kind of synchronicity and apophenia and stuff, they got to this meme, and then they, and then the mainstream got hold of it and said, oh, it's a right-wing meme and it's all fascist, so we can't talk about Pepe anymore. But yeah, the apophenia and stuff is, you can be a little bit too reductionist about that. There's more to it than, pea-brains like Michael Shermer and stuff can get to. And then there's also the Everett effect, that Michael Shermer will never get to it because he's just got a block. he'll never see a ghost because he just doesn't believe it. So, anyway, that's a spooky thing. So maybe that's enough, unless anybody's got anything else.
I think that the problem is not about believing or not believing. That's where the problem is with ghosts, is which you take that stance that you believe or not believe, So
it's really kind of fluidity.
Yeah.
Fluidity of mind. So it's yeah.
I live in a country where everybody sees them, talks about them, and and it's just like so many people tell you that you just it's just like the weather.
Right, but when you actually see one, then you have to say, well, am I hallucinating? Now, if you're a Western psychiatrist, you're delusional, and you see visual illusions.
Funny enough, the psychiatric profession in Ireland doesn't have a problem with people talking about ghosts or fairies or
Try that
trolls
in America.
Yeah.
No, there's a guy who managed to get a motorway moved because they were going to construct on the site of a fairy and an ancient tree that had a lot of power. So the motorway had to go around the place. So there's still in here. It's quite serious, and it's not that it's serious. It's that it doesn't go into the realm of psychiatric things when you talk certain things like that. Yeah. I don't know about the new generation. They might, but where I live, and it's really one of the most remote places, and the doctors would not pass any remarks if somebody told them that they're seeing ghosts and that they've seen fairies or they've heard the banshee or, things like that.
Yeah, I'm from being in Greece. I'm starting
Iceberg,
to get a new. I'm starting to get more of an appreciation for Orthodox religions, because from being in Greece here, I think that it offers some protection, and it's kind of
yeah,
counterintuitive. You'd think that an Orthodox Greek culture would be very oppressive and no ghosts and stuff, but it's kind of the opposite, because for starters, Greeks only have a thin layer of Christianity. They're all freaking pagan if you scratch off the paint. And but the fact that you have the Orthodox Church that believes all this weird stuff, it actually permits all the pagan weird stuff. Because you see, if they had a complete rationalist American style ban on spooks and ghosts and stuff, well, it would run counter to the church, which is all full of miracles and spooks and ghosts and stuff.
but you see the Irish blend of Catholicism is also the same as what you see in Greece, because it's very different to the rest of Europe, where they were allowed here to keep an awful lot of things, to use the same places, the same holy wells, the same things that were pre-Christian. So it's a very special brand of Christianity, and that kind of seeps into the university and into the medical world and everything, and the psychiatric world, because this kind of blurred limit between rationality and what is just there, and the people that are there. You've got this in Iceland too, very much too. It's extremely you scratch a little bit and you get all the old beliefs, not beliefs, the old facts, the old things of the land that are there, the mysteries,
Yeah, but it's very much the same in Greece. They've kind of retained it all, but
and rituals too.
It's so fascinating, because in the West we psychologically completely fucked up, but we're complete rationalists and we don't believe in ghosts and stuff. And then these Orthodox cultures, like in Greece, they believe all the weirdest shit known to man. They're all Kabbalists. They can all add the Greek letters. They can all tell you what the numbers are for the Greek letters and add them together and get relations. All this kind of gematria and stuff, which completely beyond the pale in a liberal democracy. But they psychologically sane. So they're far more psychologically grounded here in Greece than anybody in America. So go figure. You got all this weird shit that Dickie Dawkins says, like, oh, it's a pagan weird crap, we got to leave alone. It's like, yeah, but these guys are not committing suicide or going to drugs, and they have a social. So it's like, rationalism and stuff is not as great as we make out. In fact, it's a kind of brain disease, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we should end it on that note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Well,
all right.
nice to see you all again. And yeah, we'll try to get some. Maybe see about Kevin. Maybe should we talk to Kevin on Friday?
I can message him if you like. I'll message him on his Discord, and yeah, he's open to it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, is it fruitful? Do you think?
I don't know why he likes when I call it really nice. So I just.
Well, it's basically, it's kind of nice balance, because Kevin is like the guys' club, and then like XR and everybody is like the girls' club.
All right.
I don't know. I don't know. I see also complete extreme political. I mean, they're completely two different worlds too. So I don't see it as a gender thing. I see it more like it's another world. World of Kevin. It's just like I'm on holidays when I go there. I'll tell you.
No, but Kevin's thing is very much a guy thing.
Is it? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 Well, I like them. I don't mind. Okay. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye.
See everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.